Here it comes, a classic 280ZX. And she is cherry looking. And this just happens to be one of 3 Z cars that my neighbor Fred owns. This one happens to be in beautiful shape. It is a 10th anniversary edition. Today on Earl's Classic Cars, we'll be back to our Neighborhood Classic Car series where we will feature
not one,
and
not two,
but 3 classic 1980 280ZXs owned by my neighbor Fred. So join us as we get to know Fred and these 3 special classic sports cars. All right, guys, so here we are. Not only are we doing a Neighborhood Classic edition, but we get a mini drive-by junkyard edition.
Yes, absolutely.
How about that? So Fred, what's going on with this one out here? This looks like another anniversary 280Z, am I correct?
It is. So this was a push, pull, or drag it home. And it never ran, but I needed some parts.
Okay.
And I was feeling like it was probably a good idea to have a parts bin just in case it turns out that I need something and I can't get it anymore. So this one popped up in, maybe it may have been Craigslist again. And I said, well, I better grab that. And it was super cheap. They were really trying to get it moved. And so I came along and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just come along and haul this thing home. And I've gotten most everything I think I need off of it now. So.
Okay. So what have you taken off of it for your other vehicles?
Okay, so I think I got a, I took one of the wires off of the coil over there.
Okay.
Let's see, I got one of the fusible links. I lost a fusible link once.
Okay.
Let's see what else. I've had a couple of things here or there. I took some of the interior trim panels.
Okay.
For the older Z that I have there, that's been in the family a while. And
Okay.
you can see that this one's really, it's pretty well, taken back to the elements by the environment.
Oh yeah.
So there are huge holes in the floor. So yeah, this one's.
Do you know what number it is? I was looking for the plate, but I don't see the plate.
I never actually knew.
Okay.
And the way these things were numbered, they're not actually sequential. So
Okay.
you can't really go by the VIN number.
Is that because they kind of went back and forth between producing the anniversary and the regular ones?
Right. I think they probably had a kit, and when an anniversary car came through, this kit would have the serial plate, the anniversary stickers, the badges, and that were all gold badges. And I think they probably just took that kit and said, okay, the next one that comes along gets this kit. But the kits may or may not have actually been in sequential order at that time.
Okay.
So even if you look at the VIN numbers, the numbering is not necessarily in sequence.
Got it.
So
now,
that's kind of been what's interesting.
You know, with some of the older cars, like Pontiac, for instance, they have like the Pontiac Historical Society, which can help decode cars and figure out what they are. Does Nissan have anything like that for their Z cars?
I don't actually think so. Not that I've really heard of. There is a page on the internet where some loyalists went after a project to start to record the serialized cars. And so there's a register.
Okay.
And you can see in the registers, like, the engine numbers aren't sequential, the body numbers aren't sequential, but you can look straight down and see that, number 1001 and number 1002 weren't necessarily built on the same, in the same order. So that was kind of, it was enlightening to see that, because at least you know.
Do you know if, say you had a car like this, and you wanted to know, is there a way to contact Nissan and maybe have them help you find out what the number is?
So I've looked into that before, and because they are basically, based in Japan, and this was more of an American car option, this was really not sold in Japan in their domestic market.
Okay.
And they didn't really have a lot to say about the order.
Okay.
Um,
I just didn't know record-wise if they, if they
I
knew
don't
they
think
did
they really
3,000, they could say, well, it ties to this, VIN number, and
right.
so, huh.
Uh, I'm not sure that they had the forethought that these things, 30 years from
Yeah,
now
right.
might become
Collector's
somehow
things, yeah.
collectible or, of interest to people that would really want to know, which was very short-sighted in my opinion. But
Well, yeah,
nevertheless, here we are today.
here we are.
And
But you can definitely tell it is one. I'm just always curious, like, okay, I got to know the number. Which one is it?
me too.
What if it's number one?
I know that it's not number one. That's all I do know, because number one does exist. Uh,
What if it's number 3,000? I mean, that's the other end of the
yeah, the
sentence,
bookends,
right?
right? Exactly.
So, so what do you plan on doing with this? You just going to keep holding on to it then for parts?
Well, I think the lady of the house has decided that if I'm not getting parts off of it anymore, that it might have lived its tenure
Oh
here
no.
at the house. So I tend to trust her judgment on some of those things, and I think it might not have much more time here at our place.
Well, maybe somebody will want it and they'll get
Yeah.
it restored, because I mean, there's still plenty to it that somebody could get it running. Now, having said that, I don't know anything about the restoration parts market for these cars. Is there a good market for restoration parts for Z's?
Nah, not at all. Not for this generation at all. Now,
Really?
if you were to look at the first generation,
Mm-hmm.
Nissan actually had a program where they restored uh, a handful, maybe 100 or 150, or
Yeah.
it wasn't really many,
Right.
but they restored some 240s back to factory specification.
Okay.
And that included resourcing and, reestablishing all of those parts. So that series, those people that made those parts basically have tried to continue to provide those out in the aftermarket. A lot of them have.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more available for a 240 in
Mm-hmm.
the early generation Zs. But this particular series was stuck in the middle of
Right.
uh, you know desirable and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily as desirable, and they made, I think there might have been as many as 250,000 built between 79 and 83.
And that's a lot
That's a
more than
lot
the
for a sports
240s,
car.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's amazing. Now, what differences are there between the 280Z and the 280ZX? Are they basically the same car with just better appointments and features on the ZX, or?
So the ZX did pick up more luxurious features like
Mm-hmm.
power steering, because power steering was not applied for the Z series. And it also picked up air conditioning was optional from the factory. And I'm not really clear on this, but I think maybe even the later ones might have gotten factory air, but the early generations before 77 were applied as a dealer option. So the dealer would actually put your air conditioning option on.
Okay.
And so these cars started to come with those features.
Mm-hmm.
The high back seats, the T-tops were added, the turbos were added later. But it's an all new body, and they carried over the mechanicals for the most part.
Okay, so if you
So
were to find a 280Z or 280ZX, you can grab parts off of either one and kind of use them on the other then.
certain ones, especially when you're talking about the engines, transmissions,
Mm-hmm.
the drive line, things like that,
Okay.
they do share a lot of components. As far as the body is concerned, very little is carried over. I
Because
mean,
the
very, very
ZX is
little.
a little bigger, right? Isn't it?
I think it is a little bit
Little more
bigger,
stretched
bigger
out. Yeah.
body, and it's heavier,
Mm-hmm.
which was one of the Achilles heels. Was uh, the the 40, 60, and 80 Z series. They all did have four-wheel independent suspension,
Mm-hmm.
but this was more of a trailing link. A rear suspension that was kind of on a subframe, and the others were like McPherson struts all the way
Yeah.
around.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually more of a like a sportier tuning, easier to tune
Yep.
car in the previous generation. This one shares a lot of components with the Maxima. It was designed to be a more of a touring car and less of a sports car. Lots more, sound deadening and
Mm-hmm.
creature comforts. These came with auto AC
Okay.
on the high trim grades and stuff like that. That the earlier ones did not. So
Okay. Now,
digital clocks and
I noticed this one had T-tops too. Did they all the anniversary ones have the T-tops?
all anniversaries do have T-tops.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I mean, I can understand where your wife doesn't maybe want you to keep it, but I mean you're keeping it well around here. I mean it's well manicured. You weed eat around it. Makes great lawn art.
Yes, yes, it does.
It's kind of
Lawn
like
art,
a reflection of the other ones. It's just the other side of the coin here.
right?
So well, it sure. Have you ever tried? Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. Did you ever try to get this running? Was it running when you got it, or?
No, it never ran
Okay.
for me, and
Okay.
I never even tried to start it.
Okay. What did the
Yeah.
previous owner have to say? Anything about it as far as whether it,
It was in a
ran when it
barn in
parked, or?
Kentucky, and a little young guy said, "My uncle had this car running, and he gave it to me, and I never got it running, and now it's time for me to make it move on." And I don't think he ever even got to drive it, and he sold it to me for, of course, my purpose was for
Right.
a parts car. So
If the engine turns over?
I would say it probably does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think most of the problem with these had to do with sitting, rust,
Mm-hmm.
fuel system problems for whatever reason. Fuel pumps, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, most people were kind of, again, a little skittish to work on them because they weren't really comfortable with the fuel injection, and maybe the materials for how to diagnose these things were not so good. So yeah, I think that's probably what caused this car's demise. Not only the rust, because the rust is extensive. You can literally see the ground if you look inside the uh, luggage room.
So the barn that you found it in, I guess it didn't get in that barn fast enough.
No, it definitely did not.
So what do you
You can
think?
probably tell here as well.
What do you think, folks, in this mini drive-by junkyard edition? Is it restorable? Would you try to get it running? Or should it just stay here in this drive-by junkyard? Which, by the way, Fred's wife said it's not staying in this drive-by junkyard. So maybe you could put it in your drive-by junkyard. But let us know in the comments. Alrighty, so here's Fred's other 10th anniversary edition 280ZX. And Fred said he's going to have to tell me about the dent here. What happened, Fred? Was this you?
No, actually, this was a
Uh-oh.
teenager issue. So my son, he actually backed my hard body into it, and
Oh no.
basically the bumper came along here and creased it pretty good, and
Oh.
so that took out this fender. But other than that, this car has been around in my fold from '99 or so. I think is when
Okay.
I bought it.
So you've had this one the longest then,
I have,
obviously.
yes, and unfortunately, the bones are not as good on this particular car. There's some underbody rust and things in different places, but
Okay. Was this a northern car too, like the other one?
it was definitely somewhere near the Mason-Dixon line. It may not have been in the
Okay.
salt all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it was definitely there enough that we had some rust damage on this particular one, and it
Okay.
actually did get a repaint over the years, but.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed this car. I drove it. I enjoyed it as a daily driver for quite a while, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's got a little cancer, but
This is the one you weren't as worried about taking out to drive in different
right,
weather, right?
exactly,
So,
yeah. So
well, you got one for bad weather, you got one for good weather, right?
right,
I mean,
exactly,
that's the best of both worlds. So.
yeah. So
Okay, so this one's a 5-speed too?
it is also a
All
5-speed.
right.
This particular one is 1954 of 3,000, and so it too has a lot more mileage. We're on the 171 753, and had the seats covered in vinyl instead because it was cheaper at the time, and that's all I could afford.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this car was definitely one that in our family, my son and I we were able to enjoy taking a drive out and take the tops out, and we could park it anywhere and not worry about it so much. And so I've kept it here because it's part of the family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Car's been around that long. It's definitely part of the family. Now, I see you've got an aftermarket stereo in this one. Did this have that dual setup like the other one did?
It originally did,
Okay.
and the previous owner removed that.
Okay.
And they did actually have a cassette player, AM/FM cassette player combo.
Okay.
But it wasn't the single DIN style like you have here.
Yeah.
It was still the two-post
Okay.
design, and it gave out.
I understand.
And when it did, the most obvious, cheapest, easiest fix was to change to something you could buy at Circuit City.
I was just wondering, since they were all basically the same design or build and stuff like that, with that blockout plate, it was hard to tell if it had the cassette player that went with it and everything.
Right,
so.
exactly. So.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
So it's got the 2.8, right? So we probably don't need to look under there. We're going to see. You want to look under there?
You can see the difference, and I'll let you hear it run as well, because you can see the.
Okay.
I can show you that this is a California edition, so you can see.
Oh yeah, I'd like to know the difference there.
There's your O2 sensor there.
And that's the entire difference, huh?
Yeah. How about
Just
that?
an O2 sensor. Boy, if California regulations were only that easy these days.
Exactly. It'd be tolerable, right?
Yeah, you could maybe put up with it. That's the beauty of fuel injection right there. Didn't even have to get in and pump the pedal.
Right, just turn it over and let it go.
Oh yeah. Boy, that's just a good sounding engine.
Time for a valve adjustment. I can hear that now.
You do all that work yourself when it comes to things like that?
Yeah. I tried and learned, and everything I do is a learning experience.
Oh yeah.
One
way or the other, right?
Right. I think that's probably common for all of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's good until things go wrong, and then you got to figure it out. But you learn, no doubt about it. So, what's the most major thing you've done on this particular one over the years that you've had it since you said 99?
Since 99.
Yeah.
Let's see. Powertrain wise, I did nothing.
Okay.
Just changed the plugs and oil.
Okay.
I did have an exhaust manifold leak.
Okay.
So I had to get that, but I didn't actually do that work myself. I did have another Z guy that was super talented go after that. So that was the most work I think that this one's had, and replace the O2 sensor. But really, this one came running well, and for the most part, it's done quite good over the years.
Well, that's amazing. So you said you got this one from up north. How did you find this particular one? Was it another? I mean, that was probably pre-Craigslist days, right?
Yep, it was. It was in the Auto Trader, or what we used to call the Trader's Post.
Right, right.
And a guy up in Fort Campbell had started a project, and he had stripped all the paint off and took the bumpers, and the seats were in bad shape, and I guess he kind of got disinterested, or it was a lot of work. So he said, I'm just going to get rid of this. And when he did, fortuitously for me, I was able to slide in there and get it for really cheap. And I drove it from Fort Campbell with no bumpers and no license plate, and caution to the wind. But when you're that young, you don't really care.
That's right. That's right. You'll get there.
Right. If I get pulled over, I'll ask for forgiveness.
Crazy things that those guys do on YouTube nowadays. I'm sure what you did was probably pretty mild.
Right. They might have let me go, but then again, who knows?
Right. Right.
But
well, that's quite a story. Now, was this your first Z car?
This was my first Z car.
All right.
Yep. And
yeah, you got to keep that no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. So
now, tell me again about this story with the dent. Your son, he must have been just beside himself.
He was devastated. I think I was devastated. He was devastated. He had to come in and tell me, and I had actually parked it behind my truck, and it was at night, so it was a very innocent. It was a very innocent thing, you know, that he just couldn't have seen it, and he backed the truck up, and he could feel it once he hit it. You know?
Oh yeah, I'm sure he did.
But,
well, you know, there it is now as a reminder. You both can laugh about it now, right?
Right, exactly. Maybe I'll never fix it just so I can have to tell the story.
That's right. You can say you're still on probation. Don't forget that. Restriction, not probation. Restriction, that's what I mean.
I recently let him drive my 370 for the first time, and
Yeah?
so I said, just don't bend it.
If you know what I mean, son.
I think he knew what I meant there.
Oh boy, that sounds
I think
good.
this one runs pretty good.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it was quite pleasing to have something I didn't have to worry about whether it would start or not.
No, you just get to get out and enjoy it.
Right.
No doubt. Alrighty, well, let's see what else you got here for toys. Fred, so tell me about this 10th anniversary edition you've got here.
Well, this particular one is a 1980, and this was a special edition package that was put together to commemorate 10 years of having the Z-Car platform in America, because the first 240Zs rolled on the U.S. soil in like 1969 or so for a 1970 model year. And so I think the Datsun and Nissan company basically wanted to celebrate that heritage. And it also happened that movies like Smokey and the Bandit were coming out, and the black and Vegas gold paint combinations were becoming a big thing. And this particular car, it's an upper trim level 280ZX, so it's the ZX series. They had started making the ZX series in '79, and this particular model here was one of 3,000 with this paint scheme. So
did they come in other color combinations?
They did, actually. So they made 3,000 total 10th anniversaries, and of the 3,000, they actually had 500 of those that were made in a different paint scheme of a regal red mixed with black as a two-tone.
Okay.
So
basically what we're seeing here with the gold would be red instead, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
And those red ones are very rare. There's only 500 of those that were made.
Okay.
So when you see one of those, you've actually seen an albatross. But there are quite a few of these 2,500 still hanging around.
Of these black and gold?
Of the black and golds.
Well, that's still not a very large number.
I think their actual production numbers for the ZX series for that year, I think it was quite a bit larger. So these were just a very small, drop in a large bucket,
Okay,
but,
right.
At the time, there was no option available, so they all either came fully loaded or you didn't get anything. So, and they were also sold in Canada, so there's some Canada models in the 2500.
Now, could you get both automatic and the stick shift in these anniversary editions?
You could, and this particular one here being a 5-speed, and also my other one, this one is number 1997 of 3000, so they're all numbered.
All right.
And so of course they have a number plate there in the center. And what made these cars unique, obviously, besides just the paint scheme, was that they came with a stereo that had a little bit of an upgrade. So it actually had a surround sound amplifier in it and just a little bit more power. So that was one option that only came on the 3000. And then in addition to that, they had leather seats. And the leather in this car has actually been replaced. But leather was not produced on any other Z's before this time. And also new for 1980 was the T-bar roof or the T-tops. So those were the highlights that made the anniversary cars unique from just the high trim level ZXs of that time.
Now, is that an original stereo setup in there with the Hitachi
It is.
cassette player?
It is.
Wow.
So they all came with an auto reverse, AM FM cassette with surround sound. This particular car I've actually switched over to retro sound. So it has all of the mechanicals and the mechanics of the original radio, but there is an electronic tuner in there now.
Okay.
So.
I'm sure that improves the sound quality, right?
Oh, it does. It makes a true driving pleasure out of it now. was an indicator of the engine size.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously when they started with the 240, it started with a 2.4 liter straight six. And then obviously it made 150 horsepower, which was very good at the time. But the emission standards got very stringent, and since they had to add all of the emissions regulation components, the engine was not making as much power, so they decided to increase the displacement to make up for that.
Yep.
So that led to the 260 and now the 280. And this engine setup really launched in the previous body, but they basically carried that engine series over into the ZX, and that's what you have here today. So if you see a 77 or a 78 280Z,
Yep.
you've really pretty much got the same engine
Okay.
setup, and
So
these were all fuel injected.
So the 10th anniversary, that was an appearance package thing.
It was an
Okay.
appearance package. You picked up the luxury features, the leather seats, the obviously the stereo the T-bar roof came on every one of them standard, and then all of this all of the workings here underneath the hood were pretty much carry over to a GL or a top grade 280ZX at the time.
Okay. So other than that, there was no performance differences at all between the non-anniversary and the anniversary
That's
editions?
correct.
Okay.
It was same performance, and the turbo came along in '81, so that was the next big step for the Datsun series for as far as power was concerned, and they added a little small turbo there. So
Yeah.
81 and a half added that turbo, and
How much more horsepower did that give you?
I'm not actually sure. These made about 140. I'm not really sure. I'll have to research that.
Okay.
But,
Well, when I was
know
doing some
that,
research on it, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you,
please do.
but when I was researching it, I found it ironic at that time that 81 they came out with the turbo, kind of increased their power. At the same time, 81, 82, GM, and all the domestic manufacturers were really throttling down. I mean, I remember when the 82 Camaros and all those, they were just sad sack. You know, they had 305s, but they were just terrible.
Just barely making 150 horsepower.
Yeah,
At that.
yeah, exactly. All right.
So these were overhead cam engines. They were fuel injected. So I think that was pretty pretty high tech, I think, for the time period. Your European cars had those features, but I don't think most of your American cars weren't really coming that equipped in that way. You know, most of them were still push rod engines.
Yep.
So I think it was pretty scary for people to hear it had electronic fuel injection and things like that. But
Well, I did a video recently, and if you guys want to check that out, it was about a guy named Larry who has two classic Chevrolets. He has a 69 Camaro and a 65 Corvette, and his 65 Corvette originally came with mechanical fuel injection. But he said the problem with that was they couldn't find people to work on them and keep them running. And he said he could put it back on his car, but it would be like a $1,500 or $3,000 to get that mechanical fuel injection back on, and then you can't find anybody to work on them.
okay,
So
tough.
yeah, you're right. Back in the early '80s, most everything was still carbureted, and they hadn't even come out with the throttle bodies on the GM cars and stuff. So yeah, but so what do you think about this early fuel injection compared to today's cars?
My personal opinion, that was one of the reasons why I selected this to go with this line. I wanted to understand and learn well how fuel injection worked, how these cars were designed comparatively speaking to the newer ones, and it was a rudimentary system, but by and large, for most of the 90s up into the 2000s, you really had the same system with smaller, nicer, better quality components with better performance, but the fundamentals of the system were the same.
Okay.
So
has it been reliable for you?
they are quite reliable. They usually have very good startability. These two of mine, I think that's what makes them attractive, is you can usually just, as long as they've got a good strong battery, you can get them to start.
Gotcha.
And when they start, they usually run pretty well. And this particular one, was a federal. The other one is actually a California.
Okay.
And the major difference was that the California had an O2 sensor, so it had mixture feedback
Okay.
into the computer. So it was a little bit better on gas and a little bit more, efficient and cleaner burning engine. But
Mm-hmm.
essentially, beside those two things, they're exactly the same.
Did it take away from the horsepower at all with the
I
differences for
don't
California?
think I don't think I can detect a lot of difference. If there's a difference, it's very small.
Okay.
But it's with these two cars being as old as they are.
Mm-hmm.
That may be one is maybe not making as much power as it used to, or maybe the other one's pretty high. I don't know. They're
Right.
not very much different on it. I guess I would call myself an enthusiast.
Yeah.
And luckily, up until maybe 5 or 6 or 10 years ago, nobody really wanted a 280ZX. So
That's
it
right.
made it easy for you to, grab something up
Right.
and, try to make it operational. So
Now, is that why you chose it too? Because it was more affordable to kind of get what you wanted in terms of a Z car?
I
Yeah.
did. It gave me a really good platform to learn on. The
Mm-hmm.
parts were plentiful.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see in the back, it's not a surprise for anybody that has one of these to have a parts car laying around somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You got lots of room to work on things.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of different from new cars.
I was kind of thinking that as we were standing here looking at them, like, I'm surprised at how much room there is to work on. I mean, you can get basically down underneath here if your arms are long enough and get to the starter, and
Right, you certainly
it's
can.
amazing how much room you have in there. Let me flip to the other side. All right, we get to look at it on this side. You can see that throttle body injection, and look at that. He's right. It's an early edition of that stuff, but you can definitely see the similarities in the setup between that and today's models and everything. No doubt about it. You got the fuel rails there and everything. So, can we start it up again and get another look at it with it running?
Yeah, let's start it up. So
That fuel injection, we won't be having to sit here and listen to it trying to start, that's for sure.
that's right. The longest you'll have to wait is me to figure out where I put my keys. There they are.
Sounds like something I would do, pull the car out of the garage and not know where my keys are. Oh, wipers work, that's a good sign. Oh yeah. It's got kind of a deep, little throaty sound to it.
I think so, for a small engine
Yeah.
like that.
Like I said, I was telling you before, my friend had that 240SX, and I was surprised at the power it had.
Well, my brother actually had a Z before I did. And an uncle of mine had a Z before him. And as a kid, I felt like, it was kind of special to have a Z. So that led for me to feel good about that brand and that type of sports car. And the fact that I could buy one cheap really made it attainable. So it was the attainable sports car.
There you go. That's the other thing. And when I was doing the research for our video today, how affordable these cars were, and they came in and they really shook up the market, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The Jaguars, from what I understand, the Porsches of the day, and the MGs and things like that could not compete with the affordability and the price performance of these cars. So,
it's a fact.
So you said your uncle had one?
My uncle had a 280Z.
Okay.
And my brother also had a 280Z. And I was just, a teenager.
Yeah.
When I was in grade school, the uncle had one.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all grade schoolers, and grade schooler boys are all crazy about cars. And I was super crazy about the Datsun. So, yeah. That was kind of an attainment thing for me. I felt like once I got my first Z that I was a big guy. I felt really big then. I was like,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, I've got a Z now.
Yeah, that's an impressive exhaust note for a straight six. Well, she sounds and runs good. How many miles it got on it?
This particular one has 50,680.
Original miles.
Yes.
Wow.
And, there's a story that goes with this particular one. I got it actually on eBay.
Okay.
I was it eBay or Craigslist? Craigslist. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So at the time, yeah, at the time, I was really just looking for parts because obviously, you know, anybody that's trying to keep an old car together is always looking for part opportunity. And this one was in a garage in Michigan. And apparently apparently the previous owners had gotten some age on them and had parked the car. Being a manual, it was a little bit harder for them to shift. So they kind of sat it and left it parked, and the clear coat had gotten really bad on it, but essentially the bones were good. And for a Michigan car, especially a Japanese car, to have good bones was such a rare thing from the 80s. But that kind of led me to think if it has low miles and sheet metal's not completely ruined, then it was a toy to be driven on nice days. And so I talked to the guy that was kind of helping the lady sell it, and he said, I can't get it to run. So I said, yeah, I probably can get it to run. And with these things, you clean out the fuel system, and once you get all the garbage out of there, they generally will run pretty good. So that, lo and behold, was the problem. It was a fuel tank that was full of rust, and fuel filter was fully clogged, and there was the suction lines that were bringing fuel to the front were clogged up. And so after cleaning out all the garbage,
Yeah.
believe it or not, after that, that was the major fix for this car.
Wow.
Everything after that was just trying to make it run a little bit better.
So how long have you owned it?
So I bought this one in 2015.
Okay. How long had it been sitting before you got it?
It looked like there wasn't a plate on it, but it looked like they had some paperwork from like in the 90s.
Okay.
So maybe it had actually been driven at some point, maybe in the 90s, like 90 or 91.
So it may have sat 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, so it had a long time of sitting.
And all you had to do was clean up the fuel system.
Right. So I dropped the tank and dropped the lines and pumped that whole system out, and all of the orange stuff came out, and we put clean gasoline in and a new filter and purged the fuel injectors, and it essentially just started up and ran.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now, how did it look? Was there any rust or anything you had to do, or is it just needed to be polished and washed and cleaned up?
So this is a repaint.
Okay.
And all of the clear coat was severely damaged because it was kept outside for many years, but it wasn't necessarily directly outside. I think it must have been under a carport.
So maybe they didn't drive it in the winter and it didn't get a lot of salt on it?
This is obviously a repaint, and so there was like a little bit of tiny like surface rust in a couple of little places near the wheels, but nothing like what you would expect for a car in this region. You know?
Where you could see from side to side, through all the holes.
Not like that parts car back there.
Yeah, those Michigan cars, you know, they don't need sunroofs because they got plenty of air coming in from other places a lot of times.
You can pretty much look down and check your speed by watching how fast the road's passing by.
You got the Flintstone version, right? You can paddle your way through. Now, did you have to replace the seals on the T-tops and things like that too?
All that's original.
Wow.
Believe it or not.
Wow, that's amazing, especially with it sitting outside.
Yeah, all original. Every seal on this car is still original. And as far as I can tell, it's pretty airtight. So hopefully that continues to be a thing.
How often do you get to take her out?
Usually on the weekends.
Okay.
I don't leave it sitting most of the time because I guess I'm kind of nervous that something will happen to it.
Yeah, they're meant to be driven when you can, for sure, no doubt about it. I get nervous with my son's truck just sitting down there. Sometimes I just got to go out and start it. I need to move it. I know I need to move it. So.
Fluids need to move. That's exactly right.
That's right. Yep, and the rubber needs to flex and all that stuff. So I can tell you're very proud of this car, and you should be. It's a beautiful example. This little pup here has tried her hardest to be a part of this video since we showed up the first time. So let's get you on camera. What you got to say? What you got to say? Oh, now you're not going to talk? Now you're not going to talk? Wish we could take you on the ride with us. Sweet girl. You're a sweet girl. Alrighty, here we go. We're gonna head out on the road in the 280ZX 10th Anniversary Edition. Alright, well, we were gonna prove that the stereo worked, but we don't want YouTube to demonetize our video. Not that we're making any money on it yet, but here we go. Fred, you ready to show us what this thing can do?
Let's take off.
Let's go. Been waiting on this for a while now. We had all the fun talking about it, but you know the most fun is driving the thing.
Behind the wheel.
That's right. So let's go, folks. Tell you what, throw you in the back of the seat.
I think for 1980 it was pretty good.
Oh yeah, no
There's
complaints.
lots of fun stuff out there these days, but for 1980, this was about as good as it gets.
Yes, sir. I agree. But I'd love to see these gauges.
So yeah, with a little bit of maintenance, I think I probably can keep that other car doing as well as I think this one is.
Daily?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, again, just sitting there taking a picture of it for the thumbnail, it looked really good.
Yeah.
I truly think you should, keep the dent for your son, so you can always remind him of it.
Right. He has to look at it.
That's right.
Just lets me love him that much the more.
That's right. That's right.
We made memories there.
Listen to that engine go. True sports car.
Yeah.
Not going to look at the speedometer, folks. Just so you know, I think we're doing the speed limit.
It's close.
Remember, speed limit's just like age. It's just a number, and it really doesn't matter. Only to the cops.
These things made really good touring cars. You get out in the car, and probably today's not the best day because it's hot and humid, but when it's a nice cool evening, you can take your tops off and you can hit the road and just kind of set the cruise control and set the temperature on the auto AC where you like it, and you blend your air, and you can just get a nice, good, comfortable ride down a country road like what you see today.
Is this an original air conditioner in it too?
It is original air. We're still running R12.
Tell you what, folks, cool's nice. Yeah, I always thought R12 cooled better than R134A anyway.
And the reason why I haven't ever switched it.
Yeah, well, I guess you can still find it, right?
It's difficult but findable. I still have some contraband there at the house if ever I need it.
Do they? So they don't. I guess you have to get it from people, right? There's no auto parts store or anything
So
else.
there was a time recently, last couple of years, where I think if you were certified, you could get some.
Right. That's true. Yeah,
ultra expensive and that sort of thing. But if you need it, you need it. So
it's true.
I don't really think the environmental impact for a classic car is very large because most of them don't get wrecked.
Well, I never thought of it with these older cars until recently, but with all the stuff about, the newer cars, the electric cars, trying to save the environment and everything, think how much you can save the environment by restoring an old car and getting it back on the road. You don't have to mine all those materials and everything else,
you don't have to poison the environment.
Exactly. It's already here, so
right.
I mean,
There was a new era that started in the 80s. Cars from the 60s and 70s and even the 50s required a person with skill to know how to refurbish a carburetor, how to weld, because there were so many places that needed to be welded. And, you had to know how to tune your carburetors, and you had to accommodate for your altitude, so you had to retune, and fuel quality wasn't so good. And somewhere in that 80s to 90s window, things got to be really quite nice.
This thing handles, folks, let me tell you. Here we go.
Okay.
Taking him on a slalom course here.
Absolutely.
He didn't know we were going for a road race. He just thought we were going for a drive. But this thing can handle it. Oh, that's sweet sounding, let me tell you. really wish
Well,
we
I think
could play this, folks. Look at that original Hitachi CD CD cassette player. Look at that thing.
I'd say that I don't miss my cassettes.
No, I don't either. No, nope, not at all. There's Babbitt's records where you had to find the right, place in the tape and everything
Right.
else, and then of course if they get wrecked or worn out.
Right. If you want to listen to a song on side A, 5 tracks down, you have to fast forward through 5 tracks or 3 tracks or whatever to get there. And by the time you get there, you really don't want to listen to that anymore anyway. You want to listen to something else.
Yep, you're right about that.
I think I might see your next victim.
Oh boy. All right, we're coming up on a tight turn here. They're going to restore that old house there.
Oh, wow.
That's been there a long time. Oh yeah, here we go. That's what it feels like to have an R12 in a car.
Right. It used to be so icy,
Oh yeah.
You didn't really need a lot of flow because it was literally it was so cool,
So, you got any road trips planned with this thing?
Well, so the Z convention is in Tampa this year,
Okay.
and I'm contemplating making the trip.
Nice. When is that?
That one will be in September.
Oh, good, because I'm thinking, please don't tell me it's July.
Oh, no.
That's too hot.
Any car show in July, anywhere close to Florida is the wrong
Yes,
time,
sir.
right?
No doubt about it.
Actually, September is still hot, but...
Yes, it can be in Florida, no doubt
Right.
about it. I lived down there for 30-something years, so
Right.
yeah.
Usually it's kind of earlier in the year, so I'm glad they kind of forethought this just a little bit, and maybe moved it out a little just so we wouldn't suffer so bad.
So with the car show in mind, is there anything you want to do to this thing between now and then?
So it's time for a brake fluid purge again.
Okay.
I need to go in and retorque my cylinder head and my exhaust manifold from when I had those refreshed, a year ago or so. I would like to consider a more aggressive tire.
Okay.
But that's kind of a wannabe.
Right.
And I'm definitely going to do a clutch. I think it's the one thing that I haven't really touched that, maybe it'd be a good idea not to have go out on the road.
Yeah, you want to make sure that's in top notch before you start hitting the road and going all the way to Tampa.
Exactly. So those are things I haven't really gone through on this car. And I think I will feel a lot better if all that stuff's been refreshed. I don't even think it's bad, but one thing about it, if you take it apart and you look at it and you say, that looks like it's still in good shape, that's one thing, but if you've never seen if it's great or not, that's another thing altogether. So I would feel better hitting the road after I've seen that those things are in good shape.
So on your one that you consider a daily driver, got any immediate plans for that, or is this one just the focus for right now with the trip planned possibly for Tampa?
I'm thinking, I really think I will probably start working on the other one a little bit more, because I spent the last few years getting this one kind of roadworthy and ready to go and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking that it's time to switch back and go start working on the other one before the parts start to get too scarce. There are lots of guys that do donor parts and things. But it's just getting to the point where it's more difficult.
Gotcha.
Like I wanted to go back to a factory power antenna.
Yep.
Because this one, the antenna itself was an aftermarket replacement, and I struggled to actually find one that was more of an original part. But I was able to find one. Guy in Arizona, he saves the day every time I seem to have something I really want,
Well, that's the place you want to get them, out west where it's dry and everything, that's for sure.
Right. Well, it seems like there's lots of these things out there. The rain and the weather didn't eat the complete bodies of them up, so there's a lot of parts that are still available out there. But if you want anything off of the car that's plastic or made of any polymer, it's just not. There's no good stuff there to be had.
Okay.
It is pretty much dust.
What about Nissan themselves? Have they ever thought about getting into the restoration parts for some of their older cars like this?
The motorsports division has been looking at some things like, one thing that I thought was interesting was maybe about a month ago or maybe two, they announced that they were making an aftermarket double overhead cam. This is a single overhead cam for the 2.8 liter straight six. They're going to make an aftermarket Nismo double overhead cam.
Wow.
Replacement that you can, modify your engine with, which obviously that opens up a lot of opportunity for flow through the head. Obviously if you want to put more money in after that,
right?
The sky's the limit. But there are lots of L28s out there, so I think they saw that there was some opportunity. So many tuners are really interested in having that free breathing double overhead cam setup, so they've invested in it, and they're starting to sell those parts. So it has become a thing.
What about the body parts and stuff like that?
There are still some of those suppliers that have kept a business alive, just supplying parts to the first generation or the Series 1 S30 owners that wanted to restore vehicles, because since the value of them suddenly went up, all of a sudden there was a market. They're still out there. So, I was hoping maybe they might take on the ZX second generation series, but it's been a slow move for them.
Okay. As we kept driving, Fred and I began to talk about things other than classic cars, so it was time to let the 280Z take over the show. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Earl's Classic Cars. It was a lot of fun getting to know Fred and his 3 10th anniversary 1980 280ZXs, from the one that's his parts car to his daily driver and his showroom one that he had repainted, and it looks fantastic. We got to see it inside and out, including the engine compartment as well as these cool classic gauges. It was also a whole lot of fun getting to go on a ride with Fred in this car and really get to enjoy a classic sports car. And if you go to the ZCon convention in Tampa this September, you might just run into Fred. He's the one that's the most laid back, soft-spoken, and one of the nicest gentlemen I've ever met in the classic car hobby. It was really nice getting to know you, Fred. By the way, Fred had 2 other vehicles that we didn't even include in this video. He had a Nissan hardbody from the 90s, as well as a 2011 370Z. And if you'd like to see those two cars, let me know in the comments and we'll bring Fred back for another episode of Earl's Classic Cars. And stay tuned to see more from me, Earl with an E.